Hi, and welcome to Rethink Dialogue. In this episode, we're going to talk to Ric Dragon, the author of Social Marketology, which is a book about social media and the processes behind social media marketing. Let's go and talk to him. So, hi Ric.
Hello, Arnt.
Welcome to Norway. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Such a delight.
So, this is a video podcast that I called Rethink Dialogue, where I want to be inspiring to entrepreneurship and small businesses. And what would you like? What's your advice and principles about what small businesses should do and how they can use the new media landscape? Huge question.
It's a huge, gigantic question, but I do think that there are some guiding principles that can help people get through it all. And I think when they first face the complexity that is new media, that's digital, that's social, it's so overwhelming. And they think that, oh my God, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and you should step back for a minute. And I think one of the first elemental things to do is to find a handful of people on social who inspire you.
Yeah.
Right, and just follow them. So even if you followed 5 people on Twitter, 10 people on Twitter, 5 people on Facebook, something that meant something to you, right? The other thing is not to be shy about making connections with strangers. There's this concept that's called weak links. Weak links versus strong links. And it's in weak links, they discovered, that really magical things happen, that you learn about new culture, new music. So the more you extend yourself out there, the more people you meet, the more incredible things happen.
Yeah.
My own business, I was very amazed, by the way, to learn when I was recently in Copenhagen that the Danish aren't really on Twitter.
No.
Or at least not this room full of marketers. They were all like, no, we don't do Twitter. And my own business has grown 30 to 40% a year over year. We have 22 employees now. And last year, 40% of our growth originated with relationships that started on Twitter.
Wow.
It didn't mean that the relationship was, consummated on Twitter. We went and met elsewhere afterwards, but it started there.
Exactly.
So wonderful opportunities. To continue to wax poetic for the subject,
Sure.
I think for each business it is different. Each business has different types of things to do. If you're, business to business, you're going to take a different approach. If you're a consumer packaged good, you're going to take a completely different approach. And one of the misunderstandings that so many people exist, you say social media, and what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Old Spice Man, right? I saw it. They think about those wonderfully creative things that happen out there in the world.
Build something viral.
Right, and really there's 5 different major approaches to social media, and that's only one of them, that what we call the big splash. There's other ways. There's community building, there's reputation, there's thought leadership, there's these different aspects. So you have to figure out which one is going to be best for your world and what you want to achieve.
Exactly.
And that's critical.
Yeah, and also just defining first, where are your clients?
Yes.
Who do you want to reach?
Well, I don't do that first,
No?
by the way. And in my own process that I'll be speaking about, we go through a process where we start with what we call desired outcomes. It's a fancy word for what the hell we want out of this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's complex because there's purpose. The organization has a sense of purpose, hopefully, or the people do. It's not just about getting another 10% bump in revenue. There's vision. Then you get into the goals and objectives, and finally the specific metrics. And this is a whole piece of work that we do. Once we do that piece of work, we really investigate and understand better what the brand's personality is. And then we do a piece of work called micro-segmentation. Now in micro-segmentation, we do this brainstorming, and we're really trying to discover where very, very granular groups of people are on the web. Now, it used to be in traditional segmentation, they would say, no, you can't do that because there's no way you can target, those particular people. That's too specific. But in social, of course, you can do this. So if we do that piece of work, we then do the homework around where they are in communities, and that tells us which platforms we should be approaching.
Exactly.
Right? It's easy.
It is.
So easy.
It's so easy. So how did you get into the business of marketing?
Oh, that was the question I was waiting for and dreading. So actually,
Really? No.
well, there's a short story and a long story.
Uh-huh.
You have an editor, right? Video editor, so I can go a little long on it. But I'm an artist, a painter.
Yeah.
Is my background, and we artists often do a lot of different things to make a living. But I'm going back a few years. I had a show in New York one year. And we hung the show, and I had a whole week before the opening, so I'm walking down the street. Now, this is long before the internet age, and they had these computers for sale in a place. I walked in, I got one. I wanted a computer, and I brought it home.
Okay.
Well, I suffer a little bit from cabin fever. You know, in the winter, in the Catskills, we have cabin fever. You get bored, you have to do things.
Okay.
And I'm also part Airedale, which means I don't let go. So this thing came packaged with a relational database program. I dove in, I was playing with it. I got really good at relational databases.
Okay.
And that brought me into my career doing web and application development. And I had a company for many years, sold it a few years back, that focused on that. But, and of course, we always had to do search engine optimization, even when it was something called AltaVista and Dogpile, right?
Yeah.
And Google came along. We did that. But I never wanted to call myself a search marketer because the people in that industry were horrific. They were horrible. Snake oil salesmen. You know, they were coming to my clients and saying, "We'll get you at the top of the search engine for $500." They were so shifty. So a partner had come to me and said, "We've got to go in this business." And I'm like, "No. I don't want to be associated with these snake oil salesmen." He said, "No, our clients really need it." So we formed Dragon Search, which, by the way, I did not want a name for myself.
Okay.
He insisted. He says, "You've got the name. We've got to use it." So
Yeah, I was
we
wondering
did.
what the story was behind Dragon
So
Search.
that's where Dragon Search came from. And
Okay.
this was about 7 years ago, prior to what we call social media now.
Yeah.
You know, Twitter was only debuted at South by, and I believe it was 2007, I want to say. 2008, Facebook passed MySpace. So these things happened, it wasn't that long ago.
No.
But we had a startup that connected bloggers with marketers.
Oh.
Because all the marketers wanted to meet the bloggers, and the bloggers wanted money.
Exactly,
Right? And that was
yeah.
the state of things. And the very first Blog World conference was about monetizing blogging. I think everyone has been about that ever since too.
Yeah, hasn't changed.
So we were in that industry, and because we had this tradition, this background in application development, we were all about process. You know, because otherwise it's like building a new house every month. You have to be process improvement oriented. So things like Six Sigma and Lean and all of these things were the language that we spoke in. So when social came to be, our first question in the shop was, well, how do we bring process to this?
Yeah.
So that's where our organization came from. That's where the book came from. That's our legacy.
So yeah, the book.
The book,
Nice.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that was a
nice
nice
segue.
one. Yeah.
Social Marketology is a book that
Exactly.
came out in June.
Yeah.
And it's not so much a book of processes. We don't dictate what each process is, but it's a framework in which you can design processes. And really, what it is, it dawned on me later, not while I wrote it, but later. It's about the system. It's a whole system approach. And by system, I mean that there's interdependent parts. So by looking at the desired outcomes, the brand personality, it's internal to the brand. Then we're looking outward towards the micro segments and the communities and influencers, the outward look, and the entire system that they comprise. By looking at this entire thing, it prepares you for creating the strategic plan.
Right. Cool. So what would you describe as the key learnings from someone reading your book? Well,
Well, there's a lot of different parts there.
Yeah?
A lot of different.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. I think. I will tell you this. I had a blast writing it.
Yeah.
And again, part of my own personal learning style that I've come is I love to dive deep into things, real deep, and then get bored, and then I move on to the next thing. So social media is full of little things to learn: anthropology, psychology, neuroscience, primatology, all these different things that you can dive into, right? And so that enables me then to share it with my crew back home. It's fabulous. But key learnings is that it is rich, and we are in the nascence, the beginning, the birth of an enormous revolution in human communications. Now, I know people say that a lot, and it might sound trite, but if we back up and we really look at the history of media, the history of communications, the history of business, we can see these major, changes that have occurred in the past decade because of social and the whole computing, the whole digital revolution together.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different moving parts, right? And this thing has comprised. We're in this time, this very exciting time. It's for businesses. It means that they're either going to adapt or they're not going to be able to survive. They're not going to be competitive. How we talk to customers is completely changing. How we regard creating value in a business is changing. The entire landscape of business and communications is changing, and we're right here at the beginning of it.
Yeah, you're thinking that we're still in the early adoption curve.
I think so.
Yeah?
I think so. Sure.
So one thing I experienced through my work is that a lot of companies don't see the real value in investing in the 365 presence. They just think campaigns.
Well, and I think the component of value, a lot of people speak about ROI of social, and that's a very tiny discussion. It's a good discussion.
What do you think about Gary Vaynerchuk's, what's the ROI of your mother?
What's the ROI of your mother? Or even, Scott Monty also has said similar things. What's the ROI of telephone? It's a ubiquitous communication system now, so why would you question the value of that?
Yeah.
And it's true, but I think it misses the point to simply talk about ROI. Because when we really look at what social does, it has value creation across the brand landscape, the ecosystem of the brand and its competitive world, and the brand and the customer, and in the customer's mind. So these are three major systems in which social creates value and brand equity. So simply to say, gee, we're going to do a social campaign and will it increase sales this quarter by 5% is the wrong discussion to have.
Exactly.
Yes, it's great when that happens. We'll love to make sales go up, and we're going to do all sorts of things to make that happen. But I think that in social media marketing in particular, and brand marketing in general, that you have to see different aspects of it as creating short-term value for this quarter, for this year, and value that's being created in the long run and long-term brand equity.
Exactly. Good to hear. I agree with you. It just takes time to convince others to think the same way. But if you
and we do, right? We still have to go into the C-suite and have these discussions. There will be a CEO who will go, so what's the ROI of the social business?
How do we make
and
money?
And can you blame him? Let's say if he's about to spend, $50,000 or $100,000 or $500,000, he's about to put some real money on that. Should he instead go get those, those Super Bowl ads, right? It's a legitimate question, and I do think that in the industry we have to be able to have these discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was sitting at one of the panels at South by, where there was an author of a book saying that social media is bullshit.
Right, I've seen that book. Seen that book title.
He has so the interesting thing is that he claims that you cannot measure anything when it comes to social, and he's a viral marketer. So I'm like, okay, excuse me, but where do you actually measure?
You can measure.
Of course you can.
So in this landscape of measurements, anything, even brand awareness, we can measure brand awareness. For some brands, it's going to cost more to measure brand awareness than it's going to be to do another campaign. So why? But you certainly can measure all of these various aspects.
One thing he said, interestingly though, the conversation turned totally into Twitter, because that was the only thing he was criticizing, saying that Twitter has 15% of the world's population on Twitter. So it's really of the US population, so it's really small.
No Danes. Right.
And then how can you, and when a Twitter message just disappears after 25 minutes, it's gone from the stream, you have to search for it, and even to search for it is difficult. So then how can you actually say that there's value in tweeting? It's a waste of time. And that was his point of view.
Right, which as I said, I've grown my own business using Twitter.
Exactly.
And again, going back to Mark Granovetter's concept of weak links versus strong links, Twitter is really the most wonderful platform for creating more weak links, right? I can reach people, I can speak with people all across the world in certain topics, whereas Facebook is really building out of my base of existing relationships.
Yeah.
That's very, very different.
It is.
So Twitter can have amazing value.
I agree. The whole conference is based on Twitter. Twitter, so I'm happy. But let's go to my conference, for example. If let's say I just started up, what would be the 3 things based on the learning from your book that I should focus on if I should start up the
Sure.
conference?
Well, of course, starting off with your desired outcomes. What do you want out of this whole thing?
I want to be the marketing world's TED conference.
Beautiful. But and what do you want? I mean, as far as value creation for yourself, for the participants, for the speakers, for for this country, what do you want out of it, right? So you can step back and start to look at things, and you can get very broad stroke. Well, I want these, very fuzzy, beautiful, vision and purpose out of it, and then we can actually get it down to very particular measurables and work that piece out. That would be a fabulous thing for you to do. The other thing is for you in developing audience to think in terms of those micro segments. Where can I drill in and find more people that might gain value from the conference, right? Having a really clear voice of your own brand, personality, all of those things could be excellent things to do.
Good. So you talked a lot about the system and the process of social marketing, and I focus a lot about the principles. When I go on stage and talk about Rethink, I'm saying that don't look at the budgets, don't look at the brands, look at the principles of what I'm trying to say. So what are your thoughts on that, based on the process versus the principles, or are they intersecting?
They're definitely intersecting. I mean, some of the key principles that I believe in is the concept of passion points, right? We see certain brands that are able to communicate more from passion points as opposed to self-promotion. A perfect example might be Red Bull. Red Bull doesn't talk about the fluid in the can, right? Drink some of this caffeinated stuff. They talk about extreme living.
Yeah.
Always about extreme living. And because they're talking about that passion point, we see Coca-Cola says that Pepsi, the stuff in the blue can, isn't their competition. Their competition's Disney and Pixar. They're in the happiness business.
Yeah.
Now, once you start working from a really strong position like that, then everything you talk about in social becomes so much more interesting, and people want to engage with you. And if you try to insert that self-promotion in there, then that concept is going to fall apart. Now, with that given, in my studies, I have found that with some brands, their consumers, their customers actually don't mind the self-promotion in certain brands. Okay. Right? But in some brands, if you're selling toilet paper or dish soap, no way, right?
Yeah.
So the concept of brand passion, I think, is certainly one to take, and it also is one that if you start to think in those terms of value creation and brand passion, then the entire dialogue with the world is transformed. It can transform your purpose, and the whole thing becomes a lot more exciting.
Exactly. Great. So, any inspirations besides your book that you would like to share with us? Where do you find inspiration? How should others try to find inspiration to do better?
Well, I think in our world of marketing, marketing has a black eye. Marketing is, you're the salesman trying to sell me a hairbrush, right? Yeah. And you're sleazy marketers, and they make naked women in the ice cubes, right? These ideas, and that's the worst of marketing. But in the best of marketing, what we can aspire to is actually creating value. That there's these people who make these things, right? And it has a certain value, and it has a certain value to customers, but in the marketing process and the branding process, we can create more value. We can make owning this something that creates more value in your life, and we just make life richer and better for everyone involved. And that's the aspiration, I think, of great marketing.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.